Welcome to a study of the Gospel of John, lesson number 20, which covers the pericopes of Peter's second and third denials, Jesus before Pilate, and Jesus sentenced to be crucified. Covers John 18:25 through 19:16. Pericope number 1, Peter's second and third denials, John 18:25 through 27. From the text, it seems that as the night wore on, the people in the palace courtyard stabilized themselves around small fires. It also seems that Peter tried to draw no attention to himself. I visualize Peter going from fire to fire and kind of standing in the background in the shadow because he didn't want to stand out. But he was too well known to escape all identification. And he was identified as a follower once and again. On the second occasion that he was identified, a rooster crowed in the background. Note, in the synoptic texts, he is said to have sworn an oath. None of the gospel writers means for us to understand by that language that he swore some kind of vulgar oath like we talk when we swear today. It was the standard oath, "May such and such happen to me if my words are not true." Somehow or other, most modern believers have come to believe that he used a modern swear word. That simply is not true. Second pericope, Jesus before Pilate. The events recorded in the previous pericope occupied most of the night. Since it's only 3 verses long, it's kind of hard for a modern reader to realize that this was over a period of 6 to 8 hours through the nighttime and into the early morning. Since this was the time when great numbers of Jews made their pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the Passover, it was a political powder keg, just ready to explode. And understanding that may help the modern reader understand why Pilate was so jumpy, nervous. He could see the whole of Jerusalem exploding into some kind of rebellious activity. So Pilate had moved his residence from Caesarea Maritima on the coast to the castle of Antonio, which was a 4-story square building overlooking the Jewish temple, where he could keep his eyes and be ready for anything. The Jewish leaders wanted to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, which would have kept them from celebrating the Passover. They remained outside, and Pilate came out to meet them in a small public area called the Gabbatha Cobblestone in Aramaic. When Mine and I first went to Jerusalem, that had not been excavated. But between then and 1990, when we went back, they had excavated it, and it is a cobblestone area about 18 to 20 feet square. I'd always had the idea that it was a big open area where the Jewish leaders and mob could be, but it was very small, and you could always hear in the background the Jewish mob crying out in unison, "Crucify him, crucify him." When Pilate asked the Jewish leaders what charges they were bringing against Jesus, their answer dismissed the need for any formal charges and asked Pilate to take their word for it. It's almost like a modern prosecutor saying, "I don't need to present any evidence. The fact that I have him arrested is sufficient. You just convict him on my word." Whatever motives John wants his readers to attribute to Pilate does not demonstrate the leadership that one has to expect from a Roman official. Pilate was like a lot of politicians. He wanted to straddle the fence. I heard a joke one time about a politician is a man who can straddle a barbed wire fence with both feet on the ground and not split his britches. It can be done, but that's what Pilate was trying to do. The Jewish leaders are quite open about their desire for Pilate to act, only because they were not allowed by Roman law to execute him. There is a two-level story being told here. One, the one open to historical analysis, and the one which was a demonstration of the control of the Lord of history. That is, this did not happen by accident. It did not happen by the motivation of the people involved. It happened because God had scripted this for his Son. In fact, in another place, Jesus says, "That's the very reason that my Father sent me to earth." There are certain farcical elements in John's narrative. Not farcical in the comedic sense, but farcical in people working for a goal that they don't understand what they're asking for. The Jewish leaders came to the Gabbatha, they depart. Pilate goes back inside his palace and vainly tries to elicit from Jesus something which he can use to free him. Then Pilate goes back and the whole thing repeats itself. It would be humorous if it were not so tragic, but it's a deadly farce. Pilate is morally weak, and the Jewish leaders are determined to have Jesus crucified. In the exchange, Jesus is able to make the important point that his kingdom is not in direct conflict with the empire, because his kingdom is not of this world or this age, and therefore cannot be directly in conflict. This point is no comfort to Pilate, because he tells Pilate that in any contest between the empire and the kingdom of God, it is God's power which would triumph. The defeat of the empire is inevitable, because everyone who loves what is genuine will follow Jesus and not the empire. Whether Pilate was cynical or not, when he asked the question, what is truth, is not relevant, because God's plan will prevail, and the empire becomes heaps of magnificent stone. Awesome, but empty. After one more feeble attempt to bargain with the Jewish leaders, Pilate caves in and frees a thug and sentences the Son of God to crucifixion. The Jewish leaders, in their desire to have him crucified, affirm that their allegiance is to the empire alone. Hitherto, a position which would have thought to be blasphemy. Just look at the real situation. Pilate trying to free Jesus, the natural leaders of the Jews trying to get him crucified and affirm their allegiance to Rome. In a normal situation, whatever that might have been, they would have been thought to be traitors. But traitors have become heroes, and heroes are sentenced to death. Thank you.